How can you make the most out of your paycheck every single month? Today we're going to deconstruct budgeting and the steps required to make sure you're avoiding financial failure going forward. At the end of this video, we're going to walk through our budget guide, which will give you a really good tool in preparing you for the future. A really big concern right now is that a lot of you are overspending and you're not considering the consequences. You're maxing out your paycheck every month to a point where there's very little being left for savings. Obviously, at this point in time, we're seeing inflation rising, interest rates rising, and overall not a big change to our lifestyle, which makes it difficult to spend more on those things and not wanting to spend more on our more discretionary spending. A large reason we see overspending is simply just because people want to match others in society. They see someone with a certain item and that's what they want. But overall, that's really what's going to play the biggest part in your budget, is knowing how to manage that and really how to have the self-control to make sure that isn't hindering you going forward. Just to throw some numbers your way, did you know that 46% of Canadians say they're only $200 away from insolvency every month? Meaning that if there's an additional $200 of unexpected expenses, they're at a point where they're barely being able to break even. That brings me to my next point of those 40%, 3 out of 10 can't even afford their current lifestyle. It is above and beyond what their paycheck is month to month, meaning that they're going into a deficit. And of those numbers, only 6% are seeking help, whether it's through a budget tracker, talking to someone in the financial industry, someone just to really help them get back on track. It's so common where we see people just push it to the side and it's a problem for another day, but that's today. The issue is if you don't get this on track now, you're going to see the impact later in life. And that's going to not just impact you, it's going to impact your spouse, your relatives, your children, all of that. It comes into play. Now let's jump into overspending. I want to deconstruct 3 main types of overspending and kind of why they occur. So the first one is impulse buying. Meaning you see an item, you purchase an item. Doesn't necessarily mean that you need it. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to benefit you long term. It's more so just something that you saw and you wanted at the time. Those are the ones that are going to be pushing your budget just over the edge because you don't realize how much that actually adds up. The next reason for overspending is honestly what we call the social media frenzy right now. And it really is just people trying to keep up with their peers. And you see people in a certain outfit and you feel the need to change your whole wardrobe. Well, that happens every couple of years. It's hard to keep up with that. And it really is costly in the long run. Or you see friends and family, they might be in a better financial position than you, who are taking trips and vacations all across the world. And that's not something that fits into your budget, but you make it work. You try to make it work. And realistically, it's bringing your budget down. It's really hurting you as far as your savings plans, your ability to purchase a home later on because you spent too much earlier in life. All those things come into play. The third area that I see overspending a lot is in what we're calling retail therapy, meaning that it's an emotional purchase. You have a stressful point in your life and you think that purchasing that item will make you feel less stressed. My wife loves this term, busy week at work, and she feels the need to go out and buy herself something. It's not bad every once in a while, but if that's a common occurrence, then again, it's going to be something that is boosting your discretionary spending, which limits your other areas, and that might be reducing your lifestyle spending, your food expenses. It might bring down your savings and overall your long-term goals. Overall, the biggest reason for these overspending circumstances are because there was no budget in place and there was really no financial literacy or financial understanding of that impact. Now we're going to deconstruct budgeting, and there's really 3 key steps that you need to make in order to create a strong budget. The first one being gather all the information that you need. Get it all at the beginning. Make sure you have that so you know what's going on in your financial world. I'm talking income, talking your daily expenses, and lastly, what are you actually saving right now on a month-to-month basis? Is it just a few dollars? Is it, you're only able to save your tax refund at the end of the year? what is it that you're actually able to save? The second step is analyzing your spending. Now, this is not a fun one. You have to walk through all of your monthly expenses and really see where your needs are and where your wants are. Because if your wants are way too high, it's gonna affect your needs, and it's also gonna affect your savings. So we really want you at this point to break down your spending habits and really see what is over the top. What are you spending more than you need to and should be on? The third step, the last step here, is making goals. If you have those goals, you have those milestones ahead of you, those are the things you're gonna be aiming for. Those are the things you're gonna work so hard for, and you're not gonna think as much about the discretionary spending now. You're going to try and avoid those because you want to reach that goal. For my wife and I, we are really wanting to do a lot of traveling in the next year or two. So we're focusing a lot more on our travel budget, and we're trying to pull back from that discretionary spending when it comes to shopping and eating out and those kind of things that would be seen as more of a lifestyle expense, more of a discretionary spend. And we want to be able to put that money into something where we find there's going to be more value in. Now, once you have all of that together, that's when you really start implementing and start tracking it. It's one thing to build it, it's another thing to track it. If you're not following what you set out, then you really haven't changed much at all, and you're gonna fall back into the same habits you once were. Now let's jump into our budget guide, and I'm gonna walk through a couple who, they're in their later 20s, early 30s. They are earning one income of $80,000 gross, the other income of $40,000 gross. They've got just a rental home for now. They haven't made that step to purchase anything at this point in time. Let's break down their budget, see where their spending is, and what they've decided to compromise on in order to spend more in other areas. So let's jump right into that. All right, so let's go through this budget tracker. We're gonna start off and looking at kind of each level and what we actually have implemented into this. But to start off, we have our salary, our net salary here. We have a salary amount for each individual couple. So the first salary is $22.30 bi-weekly, so every 2 weeks, which comes to about $80,000 of gross income. And then the second salary here is $1,155 bi-weekly again, which comes to about $40,000 after tax there. They don't have any other side hustle or other income that's coming in on a monthly or annual basis, with a total monthly revenue of $7,334. So we're gonna break that down and kind of show you what the best strategy is for when it comes to spending and where that should go and how much it should be. In the first column here, we have our list of expense type. In the second column, we're gonna input how much we actually spend on it. We can choose here the different expense and how often it occurs. So you can choose weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or annually. In the last two columns here, we have your budget and also the average Canadian's budget. And it really just gives you a guide on what is a reasonable spend in those areas. Again, it's a guideline. It's not something you have to fall under exactly, but if you do fall around that ballpark, that means you're doing okay as far as managing your finances. So if you look here, mortgage and rent, I have this individual renting a place for $2,000 a month. And then we just have a little bit of tenant insurance here, $50 a month. So a total of 28% of their current budget, their current $7,334, is going towards their housing expense. So in light of, looking at the average Canadian, they're spending a little bit less than the average Canadian. Next, we want to look at debt payments. So the debt payment that I have implemented for this couple is $500 of student loans. So I'm assuming this is someone in their later 20s, they probably on the tail end of their student loans, but they still are paying about $500 a month to try and dwindle that down a little quicker. So for a total of 6.8% of their budget is towards that debt payment. Next, I have communication. So their cell phone bills combined comes to $165 a month. Television and internet, often you can get this bundled for just around that $100, $120 marker. So for, $110, I've got their television and internet. And then finally, subscriptions, they're subscribed to Netflix. And this comes to a total of 4%. So $290 a month, 4% of their monthly budget. Next, I have groceries. We have $120 weekly. So they're going out and spending around $120 weekly. That is fairly reasonable. It's probably living a little bit on the higher end when it comes to grocery shopping. They've decided to spend more on those groceries though, because they're not spending a whole lot on restaurants and takeout. They're actually spending only $80 a week, which is, either 3 lighter meals or they're going to go out for 1 dinner together a week, which comes to about $80 for a total of 11.8% of their budget towards food. Next, we have transportation. They've got a car loan, so they own 1 vehicle and they're currently paying off the second vehicle at $250 a month. They have car insurance, so out here in BC, it's a little bit higher than the rest of the country. Combined, they're paying $450, which would be a very reasonable price at this part of the country. And then their gas and diesel expense, so they're spending about $100 a week combined, so about $50 a week. They fill up every 10 to 14 days. Next, we have recreation. So this is one area that I've boosted and kind of gone outside of the average Canadian. So they've decided to contribute or to spend more on vacation and travel because that's something that's important to them. They're spending some on concerts and club memberships, so the gym or anything else like that. So they're opting to spend more in that area because that's something that means more to them than this next section of miscellaneous. So in this miscellaneous section, you have your education costs, whether it's, so tuition's in there, there's books, anything like that. You have medical expense, which often isn't very large every month. Clothing, so because this person wants to be traveling and more, they've opted to decrease their clothing, their personal care, their other discretionary spending there. And then for that, we've got a total of just 5.5% of their budget out of the average Canadian spends 12% in this area. And then finally, life insurance. They've got just a bit of insurance to kind of cover them in the case of an accident or an illness from one of them, just to make sure that they're still staying afloat. So overall, we've got total expenses of $6,300, and that means they've got an extra $1,000 every month to kind of go towards their savings plan. They are, if you look here over on this right side, saving about 14% of their monthly budget, their annual budget, versus the average Canadian is only being able to save about 8%. So now let's jump over to the graphs that the data that we've entered will output. So here we just have a visual as far as expenses. It shows you what your monthly expenses are, it shows you what your monthly income is, and then the amount that you can save. Here you'll just see a simple pie chart that gives you kind of a quick snapshot of where your spending is going. And then finally, your budget versus the average Canadian. So this is a good, brief little area to look and see where you're spending more than the average Canadian. Are you spending too much on food and dining out and going out for drinks with friends? Are you spending too much on your car payment? Did you get a vehicle that just is way too out of your league at this point in your life? Those are the things that you need to identify for yourself and figure out if you need to be cutting back in those areas. I really hope you were able to find some steps that can benefit you when it comes to budgeting and really understand how making goals is gonna be your best friend when it comes to budgeting. Because without those, you're gonna fall back into the same habits that you once were in.